we've gotten all the good stuff out of going deeply into debt. You know, when you borrow money, you feel rich for a little while, and all your neighbors think you're rich because you bought a bunch of stuff with the credit cards you're maxing out. Well, that's what we're doing as a society, as a global society.
Mm.
And so now comes the hard part, where we've taken on immense amounts of debt to, fight all the wars we want to fight and buy off all the constituencies to win all the elections. And now the cost of that debt is becoming the main aspect of our financial system. The US government has taken on tens of trillions of dollars in just the last 30 or 40 years of new debt. That debt is costing us over $1 trillion a year just in interest right now. And so on different scales, it's the same thing in Europe, it's the same thing in Japan. And so you're looking at a lot of governments facing the potential of bankruptcy now, because if they keep interest rates really low in order to minimize their debt costs, then inflation picks up. In other words, people see that the currency is being inflated away and they don't want to hold it anymore, so they buy real stuff, and that makes the price of real things go up, which we know of as inflation.
Mm.
So the value of the currency starts to plunge if interest rates are held too low, which is what happened in the last few years. But if you raise interest rates to prevent your currency from just evaporating, then the interest cost on the debt that you've taken on becomes ruinous. And that's where we are now. We're vastly over indebted in every major society around the world except for Russia. And the interest costs on that debt are becoming overwhelmingly painful, while inflation is above target. So we're in a situation now where no matter what we do, we make one problem worse by trying to fix another problem. And that's for years, sound money people have been saying, well, someday we'll be in this box where there's no fix and then everything will blow up. We're in that box now. We're in kind of a death spiral financially. And that's why things suddenly seem so disturbingly hopeless and we seem so incompetent, is because we've reached the point where there's no fix.
Yeah, we're paying for years and years and years of mistakes that are now piling up to the point where if you fix one side, the other side blows up.
Yes, and it was predictable. If you knew anything about human nature in 1971, when we said, "Oh, well, we'll just have currencies that are what we say they are, and we'll create as much as we need to run the government the way we want it," you probably could forecast that we'd end up in a place like this.
Yeah.
Grossly over indebted, headed for a gigantic financial crisis. But apparently back then they were enjoying having the power to make money out of thin air so much that they didn't pay attention
to the
consequences.
In a system that basically says you're elected for 4 years or for 8 years at most, you sort of like say, okay, let me show up with a lot of results by borrowing money that someone else has to pay back, right? And I think that becomes reality. So let me try to state this again, but in doing so, see if I understood you correctly. So it's almost like, if a society wants to buy new things, they need to buy cement and copper and steel and whatever to be able to build things or to buy things for the society. You look into your safe and you say, I have $100 for copper, then I'll buy copper for $100. Post-Nixon, the end of the gold standard, you looked in the safe, you didn't find the $100. So what did you do? You printed them, right? You basically, the government was like, you know what? I have the printing press. I might as well create 100 more. Now, here's the question. Isn't that what the government is supposed to do anyway? I mean, most people think that money comes from government. Government is supposed to build money, or give us money somehow. So why is that a problem? You basically said it's because it's not linked to gold. So it's not linked to anything specific, right? So it basically means that I had $1,000 yesterday. Now I have $1,100 because I printed 100. But the value of all the things that back this up is still 1,000. That basically means every dollar lost a little bit of value when I increased the number. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, there's one more aspect of the gold standard that I should have mentioned that I didn't, so I'll mention it now. When you link your currency to something that is real and can't be created out of thin air and is therefore kind of rare, that limits the number of new pieces of currency you can create. Say you're backing the US dollar with 40% gold. That means the number of dollars outstanding can never go above the reciprocal of 40%. So that limits the supply of currency. And since gold, we basically get gold by mining it. We get it out of the ground, and we usually increase the amount of gold that exists by about 1% per year.
Yeah.
So being on a gold standard means your currency can never increase in supply by more than 1% a year. And since human populations have increased by about 1% a year, that means the amount of money per capita didn't go up for 200 or 300 years. And that means prices of things cannot go up. In fact, in a sound money system, you have deflation. Prices go down as we get more productive. We learn how to do things better in the context of a fixed money supply. And so a healthy society has prices go down each year. And that's one of the ways you can tell that we're an unhealthy society, because prices go up each year. But yeah, the reason people don't get this is because there's been no reason to understand it. We've had 50 years of what they call a credit super cycle, when the amount of debt was being raised year after year after year, and people were benefiting from it on paper. In other words, your house was getting more expensive. Your stock portfolio was going up. And one more very important aspect of inflation is that it affects different generations differently. So the people who were there on the ground floor, which is to say the baby boomers and the post-World War II generation, they bought their houses when they were cheap. They bought their stock portfolios when they were cheap, and they benefited from all the credit we created that raised the value of financial assets. So boomers got very rich. My generation, really made out from the inflation that we engineered by having, fiat currency. And successive generations have found it harder and harder to get by, because look at millennials right now and think about their ability to buy the house that their parents bought as a starter house. And that house is now $450,000, and there's a 7% mortgage on it, which costs more than the average millennial makes to buy. So my generation have kind of screwed over our kids and grandkids by generating a big inflation that benefited us and hurting them in the process. So that's one of the really despicable things about a currency that the government controls and that the government inflates away, is that it helps one group of people, the politicians who are there, the people who own houses, own fine art and farmland and stock portfolios, but it hurts everybody else.